Something you see all over the preparedness community are reasons for why you shouldn't be prepping. Arguments as why you should just do nothing. And it's all over the place because there's naysayers that are trying to dissuade you from being prepared. And I'm here to break some of those arguments because I think a lot of the concepts that they try to argue are things that are actually still viable here in the preparedness community. And if you're prepping for SHTF style scenarios to go down, then hit the subscribe button below because those are the things we're going to talk about here on the channel. And I'm trying to motivate you to prepare more rather than dissuade you from preparation like a lot of these naysayers are trying to accomplish. All right, so going to be 5 concepts that I'm going to try to break these arguments on right here, right now. And the very first one is you shouldn't stockpile things because you can't take all that with you anyways, right? I hear that one all the time. Why do you have so much food? Why do you have so much water? Why do you have so much ammo? You have all this stuff, but if you have to leave, you can't take it with you, so it's just a waste, right? Well, sure, if you have to leave, all that stuff is gone. You're right. But leaving is not our number one priority. In fact, trying to stay where you are is the best option. And if you have to leave, it should be out of necessity, aka you're evacuating because of something that's out of your control. And in that situation, leaving all that stuff behind is going to be the last thing on your mind. Now, stockpiling food and water and ammo and everything else related to prepping is a good idea. However, if you are going to have to leave your location, if you have to bug out, you should have a destination already planned on where you're going to go. Becoming a refugee is not a good way to do things. So if you have a place that you're planning on going, if you do have to evacuate, it should also be stocked. You should have things stockpiled there, right? So stockpiling doesn't mean it has to all be in one place, but having additional surplus supplies on hand and ready to go is a good idea, regardless of whether or not you can take all of it with you. Look at 2020 during the lockdowns. People were locked in their homes and had to stay in their location. And a lot of those people probably wished they had more supplies on hand during that time. A similar event like that could occur at any point here in the future. And another thing to consider, so a lot of people get it twisted when it comes to ammo specifically. They say, why do you need all that ammunition? Why do you need 10,000 rounds of ammunition? If you get into a gunfight, you might shoot 20 rounds and then you're going to die anyway, right? Well, I don't stockpile ammunition with the idea of using 10,000 rounds in a gunfight. That's not the point of it. The point of it is to have access to it if it becomes inaccessible at some point in time. Understand that while I have it and might not be able to access more, I can still train, I can still hunt, and I can still defend myself during a time where I can't get more ammunition for whatever reason that might be, whether or not it's because of laws that are being passed, whether or not that's because we're at a global conflict level where ammunition is being rationed or completely dries up. Whatever the situation, it just allows you to continually move forward when it comes to training, eating, or saving your own life. So those are the reasons why stockpiling still makes sense, regardless of whether or not you can take it with you. We know we can't take it with us. That's pretty obvious in my opinion. I know I can't take 10,000 rounds of 5.56 with me on my back. That's not the plan, I guarantee you. But that's the argument that will be sent your way to tell you why you shouldn't stockpile things. And I'm here to tell you, go ahead and stockpile. More supplies is better than less. And the other thing to consider is, if you are going to evacuate, please have a plan, have a place that you're going to go, and probably put some supplies there. Okay? Now, the second concept, the argument that I'm going to try to break on this one, all right, is you won't likely be the 5% that will survive, so why even try, right? Oh, only 10% or only 5% or only 1% of people are going to survive these apocalyptic scenarios. So what's the point of even trying? Because the likelihood that you're going to be in that 5, 10, or 1% is very low, right? Okay, well, you still might be in that 1, 5, or 10%. And I don't know if you've done math lately, but 1% of the entire population is a lot of people. Still a lot of people, okay? So you might be in that group of people who does survive. So wouldn't you like to be prepared for that situation in case you do survive whatever apocalyptic event led to this whole conversation? Not to mention the fact that even if you don't immediately survive, or even if you don't last a very long time, or whatever it is, you probably want to mitigate as much suffering as possible in process of survival, right? We don't know what's going to happen, and every minute you're suffering during that apocalyptic situation is a minute you could have probably avoided through smart preparation, right? So the whole point is, oh, don't prepare because, you're not going to live anyway. I mean, that's just a silly thing to say. The thing you should be looking at is, if something happens, how do I minimize suffering? And if I am one of the few that survives, how do I thrive on the other side of this cataclysmic situation, okay? So don't listen to that just because of percentages and statistics. 1% of 7 billion is still a very large number of people, all right? Now, the third concept that I hear all the time, and it's all over the place, and I think this is a big one because, especially in the LARPer community, people get a little bit aggro about it. But you aren't a tier 1 operator, so why do all this firearms training? Because when all this happens, a tier 1 operator is going to show up and take you out anyway, right? Which it seems kind of like an unreasonable argument to make, but it happens all the time, especially if you post anything related to firearms. If you aren't ex-special forces or whatever it is, or you don't have combat experience, suddenly it negates anything you think or say or do, and there's no point in you doing any of those things because those guys are going to take you out regardless, right? Well, obviously. Do I have weird delusions of grandeur that I could take on a Navy SEAL? No, I'm not an idiot. I honestly know that if anyone with that level of training and skill were to come after me, then I'm probably just going to die. That's just how it works. But I'm not training to fight Navy SEALs. That's not the goal when it comes to firearms training or proficiency. I'm training to be better than the rest of the 99% of the population that doesn't do any training at all, right? I'm trying to give myself an advantage for the more likely threats that will arise during an SHTF situation, right? Understand that the most likely threats are going to come in the form of nearby opportunists or criminals. It's not going to be Navy SEALs jumping out of airplanes coming to get me because Magic Prepper was that guy on the internet pre-SHTF and we don't like him, so he's got to go, right? Unlikely situation, okay? Now, if you're talking about a 1776 type of a situation, things get a little bit more blurry. But in general, you're most likely going to deal with people in your nearby area. And those opportunists who want to rob you, or those criminals who are looking to rob you and possibly hurt you, are going to be the ones you have to encounter. And during those encounters, I'm just trying to give myself as much of an advantage as possible, especially if you find yourself somewhat outnumbered, right? So the training and everything related to firearms and stuff of that nature is so that you have that advantage if that time ever presents itself. It's not about going toe-to-toe with people who are always going to be better than you. And that's just the truth. I'm sorry, but yeah, I'm 35 years old and I was never in the special ops, right? So anybody who's got that level of training is always forever going to be better at it than me. However, I'm probably better at some of this stuff than a huge portion of the population, especially when we're talking about the local meth heads. So that might give me a better chance of survival if that stuff ever happens, right? And not to mention, if we find ourselves in that old 1776 situation, I mean, it's better to have a little bit more of a chance than none at all, right? I'm just throwing it out there, okay? Now, I do need to mention that the channel's biggest supporter is Midway USA. Luckily, they help me prepare and move forward and ignore a lot of these arguments that the naysayers put out there to try to keep me from preparing more. So a big thanks to Midway USA for helping me out in that department. And I just want to mention that don't let other people dissuade you from prepping. It's not a good look. Understand that you're doing this for you and your family, which means you don't really have to listen to what all these other people are trying to tell you, okay? Keep that in mind. It's always easier to do nothing than to do something. I think we know how that works when it comes to the, let's just say, the class that enjoys everything the government was to offer them, right? Moving on from there. Hope that came out the right way. The fourth concept that I'm going to try to break here argumentatively is the whole, all of your electronics are going to fry during an EMP attack, so why rely on any electronics at all? Or why have contingencies of electronics to use in an SHTF environment? Well, an EMP, although a possible situation, is still a relatively unlikely situation, right? And using electronics is a daily thing we do. So your likelihood of using an electronic device or needing an electronic device is much higher than the likelihood of an EMP, okay? So instead of throwing everything out the window because, well, if an EMP goes off, I can't have this vehicle and I won't be able to use this flashlight and I won't be able to use a heater and I'm not gonna be able to, why sell yourself short just because of an obscure possibility? Yes, an EMP could possibly fry all of your electronic devices. You're right. But you know what? Any other natural disaster or event that goes down besides EMP might not. And those electronic devices could be very useful in that situation, right? So let's just say there's a huge earthquake and you need ways to communicate and maybe have some lights on at night. Well, it's a good thing you kept those flashlights and radios, because I knew the EMP threat made you want to throw them away. But man, glad you hung on to them, because that other scenario that happened is actually proving to be very useful in the sense of having electronics. So keep in mind that, yeah, an EMP could fry all your electronics. I agree. That's not going to stop me from getting electronics. It's not going to stop me from making my life easier or more simplified by using technology. I'm going to use technology to the very end until I literally can't. And okay, if all my solar power stations and backup power stations fail because of an EMP, I guess I'll just live 1800 style once again. But if anything else happens that takes out the power besides an EMP, and I have the ability to power myself now, I'm going to be glad I had all of those things. So don't let the idea of an EMP keep you from running electronic devices or putting electronics in your preps. It's just not a big enough of a threat for you to say, well, no electronics at all, no matter what. I'm going to have power tools post SHTF as long as it's not an EMP, and you might not. So we'll see who does a better job of building their bathhouse post SHTF. Now, if your workbench never looks like this, then you must be a saint, because I am constantly having to tear everything apart and reorganize it, and I just didn't feel like resetting it all up to look pretty for this video. So here we are, it is what it is, and I just noticed it out of the corner of my eye and felt like I needed to address it. Now, the fifth concept, okay, and this one is one that might make some people angry, okay? And it's just going to be the truth. And I'm sorry if it upsets you, but it is true, okay? And I just want you to know that this is not Magic Prepper trying to be mean to anyone. This is just logically true. It's factual. So I have to say it because it is what it is, okay? But a big one you hear a lot, and it's understandable, but it is something I hear all the time, is I can't afford to prep, so I guess I'll just die, right? I can't afford this amount of food. I can't afford to live in the country. I can't afford that gear or that tactical equipment or any of that stuff. So I guess people like me that don't have the financial resources to do those things are just going to die. Well, first off, it's a very defeatist attitude that you should not have. So regardless of your financial situation, you shouldn't be a victim, okay? Move forward with the idea that you're going to figure out ways to make it happen regardless of your current situation. Things don't always stay exactly the same way they are forever, okay? Now, here's the thing. I'm going to be honest with you here. The first part of prepping is to be able to afford it, okay? And I mean that not just in the sense of finances, but in time and energy and everything else related to prepping. If you can't afford to prep, you probably shouldn't be prepping. Your number one priority should be to figure out how to afford to prep. You have to start there first. You can't put the carriage before the horse, right? You have to have the ability to prepare before you can prepare. And that's just the truth. So if you can't afford to prep, then you can't prep. You have to figure out how to afford it first so that you can begin prepping. But I will say this, okay? If you can't afford to prep, understandable. Things happen. People are in different situations. Not everybody can just throw money and get surplus of different pieces of gear or supplies, right? It's just not how it works for everyone. If you can't afford it, understand that there are things you can do for free that can still help your preparedness. When it comes to knowledge, you can learn a lot for free on the internet, at the library, at all these different places where information is readily available for you to consume, digest, remember, and apply to your life and to the skills that you might acquire doing that research, okay? The other thing you can do for free is improve on your physical fitness. Just because you don't have money to join a gym doesn't mean you have to not work out. You can work out at home. You can do a lot of things to get more physically fit. You can work on what it is you're eating and change your diet. There's a lot of things you can do that are basically free without having to afford the ability to do it, okay? So you can gain knowledge, become more physically fit, and a big one is going to be your mindset. If you already have the mindset of defeatism, right? You're defeated in the sense of, I can't afford to prep, so I guess I'm going to die. Well, you're already not going to survive even if you could afford to prep, because your mindset is defeatist. You're already lost. You're not going to survive. You have a defeatist, fatalistic mindset. You've got to change your mindset, and you have to be a survivor. You have to have a survivalist mindset. So you can gain knowledge for free, you can improve your physical fitness for free, and you can definitely change your mindset for free. And then the rest has to be strategically figured out in the sense of how you're going to afford to do this stuff. Because it is true. I'm not here to lie to anybody. Prepping can be expensive, okay? It's generally related to the idea of surplus, right? And if you don't have surplus disposable income, it's hard to have surplus supplies that you don't need. Because if you need every single dollar you earn, you're going to need everything you purchase with those dollars, right? Just wanted to be honest with you because I understand why you can't afford it. So your first step for prepping needs to figure out how to afford it and then work on the things that don't cost anything in the meantime. And that's just the truth. But these are the concepts that I was trying to argue and possibly break in the sense of arguments for why you shouldn't prep. Why would you tell people not to prepare? It doesn't make any sense to me, okay? If you grow up anywhere that natural disasters occur on a regular basis, like Florida, where I grew up, you understand the necessity of preparation. But maybe you've lived a privileged life in a nice part of the country where there is no natural disaster threat on a regular basis. So it's easy to get to that point of saying, don't worry about it, don't prepare, there's no reason to, and all this stuff you guys are doing is ridiculous, right? I guess so, but if you've never had to evacuate because of a wildfire, you might not feel that way, okay? Now, hopefully this gave you some things to think about. Add some examples down below in the comments of the exact style of arguments that I'm talking about here, because it happens all the time, and it makes me upset. Because why dissuade people from wanting to better themselves? Which in my opinion, preparedness does better yourself. I am better off because I'm prepared to face challenges that may or may not exist in the future, but regardless, I know I can handle them more so than I could have before. And I think that's the same mentality a lot of you need to apply to any preparation that you do. It's not just, well, all this was a waste because the sun didn't explode. It's, well, if anything happened, I'd be way better off than everyone else, which makes me feel a lot more comfortable and gives me peace of mind so me and my family can enjoy the other parts of our life more easily, right? Just wanted to put this out there. Anything else you need to add, leave it in the comments below. If you need anything else from me or you want to look for ways to support the channel, check out magicprepper.com. You can also check out my subscribe star page if that's something you're interested in. And besides that, it's going to be it for Magic Prepper.